Gave up my career to care for my mother with dementia, but my husband called me selfish for neglecting our marriage. He shouted, "You care more about her than our family." My in-laws agreed, saying, "She's not your responsibility." Heartbroken, I whispered, "Look at the wedding vows you made." Their accusations fell silent when they realized what true commitment meant. I never thought my life would turn out like this. I had a career I loved, a marriage that seemed solid, and a future that felt stable. Then my mother got sick. Dementia is a cruel disease. It doesn't just steal memories, it erases whole identities, piece by piece. One day, she was my strong, independent mother who had raised me on her own, working 2 jobs to make sure I never went without. The next, she was terrified of the reflection in the mirror, convinced a stranger was in the house. She needed me. There was no one else. No siblings. No extended family willing to step in. Just me. So, I did what I thought any decent person would do. I put my life on hold to take care of the woman who had given me everything. I left my high-stress but well-paying job in finance, something I had spent years climbing the corporate ladder to secure. It wasn't even a question for me. This was my mother. My husband, Alex, didn't see it that way. At first, he acted supportive. He told me we'd figure it out together, that my mom was family, that he understood this was something I had to do. He told me I was doing the right thing. But support only lasts as long as it's convenient, I guess. Because not long after, the cracks started to show. It started small. A sigh when he came home and saw me exhausted. A comment here and there about how he wished I had more energy for us. Then it turned into questions. How long do you think this will last? Do you think she'd be better off in a care home? Do you even have time for our marriage anymore? It wasn't like I wanted this to be my life. I never wanted to lose my mother before she was even gone. I never wanted to spend my nights waking up to her screaming because she didn't know where she was. I never wanted to be the one helping her to the bathroom, spoon-feeding her, holding her as she sobbed because she was afraid of her own mind. I was drowning. But instead of throwing me a life raft, Alex acted like he was the one struggling. Then one night, everything fell apart. My mom had had a rough day. She kept asking for my dad, the same man who walked out on us when I was a baby. She had forgotten he left. She kept telling me he was running late, that I needed to call him. When I told her the truth, it was like breaking her heart all over again. It took hours to calm her down. By the time she fell asleep, I was emotionally wrecked. I came downstairs, sat at the kitchen table, and just stared at my hands. I was so drained I could barely think. Alex walked in, saw me, and let out a heavy sigh, like I was the burden in this house. "This isn't working anymore," he said. I looked up at him, confused. "What?" He crossed his arms. "Us. Our marriage. You don't even try anymore." I felt something in me crack. "I don't try. You care more about her than you do about me. About us." His voice rose, like he was the one who had been pushed aside. I was too tired to argue, too mentally exhausted to even try. "She's my mother, Alex. And I'm your husband. She has no one else. She's not your responsibility." That snapped me awake. "She's not my responsibility?" I repeated, my voice barely above a whisper. Alex rubbed his face like I was frustrating him. "You know what I mean." "No," I said. "I really don't. She's sick, okay? She's going to keep getting worse, and what? You're just going to sacrifice everything? You already quit your job. We barely talk anymore. We haven't been us in months." "She's dying, Alex," I snapped. "I don't have time to worry about date nights and movie marathons. I don't have time to sit around and stroke your ego because you feel neglected. That's not fair." "You know what's not fair?" My voice shook. "Watching the person who raised me disappear while she's still breathing." He shook his head, muttering, "This isn't what I signed up for." I wanted to laugh, but there was nothing funny about this. "In sickness and in health," I whispered. "That's what you promised." His jaw clenched, but he didn't say anything. I wanted him to argue. I wanted him to say something that would make this make sense. But instead, he just stood there, shaking his head like I was the one who had lost my mind. The next day, his family showed up. I should have known. Of course, he had run to his mommy and daddy, twisting the story to make himself the victim. His mother, Diane, and his sister, Rachel, sat me down in my own damn living room like I was a child about to be scolded. "Sweetheart," Diane started, her voice dripping with fake sympathy. "We need to talk." I didn't say anything. I just crossed my arms and waited. "Alex is really struggling," she continued. "We're all just worried about you." "About him?" I clenched my jaw. "And?" Rachel gave me a pitying smile. "We think maybe it's time to consider alternatives." "What kind of alternatives?" I asked, already knowing the answer. "There are places," Diane said carefully. "Facilities that can take care of her. People who are trained for this." I let out a breath and looked between them. "So, let me get this straight. If this were your mother, you'd just throw her into a home and forget about her." Diane's face twisted slightly, but she quickly recovered. "That's not what we're saying." "It is what you're saying." Rachel put a hand on my knee like she thought she was comforting me. "We're thinking about what's best for everyone." "No," I snapped, pulling away. "You're thinking about what's best for Alex." They didn't deny it. I stood up. "You know what's funny? When I married Alex, I thought I was gaining a second family. But what I actually got was a group of people who only care about themselves." Diane sighed like I was being unreasonable. "That's not fair." I laughed bitterly. "You keep saying that word. But you know what's really not fair? That I have to sit here and listen to the people who are supposed to support me tell me to abandon the woman who raised me. They didn't have anything to say to that. So, I ended the conversation. And that should have been the end of it. But Alex wasn't done proving just how much of a selfish coward he really was. A week later, my mother had one of her worst episodes yet. She tried to leave the house, convinced she needed to go home. I had to physically hold her back as she sobbed and fought me, begging me to let her go. By the time I got her calmed down, I was done. I was mentally, physically, and emotionally spent. I came downstairs and found Alex sitting on the couch, scrolling on his phone like nothing had just happened. I made a decision, he said without looking at me. I already knew. I'm leaving. I exhaled slowly. A part of me had expected this. But hearing him say it out loud still sent a sharp pain through my chest. Then go. His head snapped up, like he expected me to fight for him. I didn't. And just like that, in a single moment, I had two people in my life who no longer remembered who I was. But I wasn't the one losing anything. He was. Alex didn't leave that night. Not completely. He packed a bag, sure. Huffed and puffed about how I had forced him into this. But he didn't actually walk out the door. Not until the next morning, after making a big show of slamming drawers and pacing the hallway, like he was waiting for me to beg him to stay. I didn't. When I woke up, he was gone. For the first time in months, the house was quiet. Not peaceful, just empty. It should have hurt more than it did. But honestly, all I felt was relief. I didn't have to tiptoe around his moods anymore. Didn't have to brace myself for his sighs and muttered complaints. I could focus on my mom without worrying about whether Alex felt neglected. It didn't take long for his absence to be noticed. My mother, on one of her rare clear days, looked around the living room and asked, "Where's that man?" "Alex," I asked. She nodded. I swallowed hard. "He left." She frowned. "Good." I actually laughed, which turned into a sob halfway through. She reached out, patting my hand the way she used to when I was a kid and had a bad day at school. It was such a small thing, but it nearly broke me. She wasn't always lucid, but when she was, she saw everything. For the first time in a long time, I felt like someone was in my corner. But Alex wasn't done with me. 2 weeks passed. Then, a text. "We need to talk." I ignored it. The next day, another one. I didn't mean for things to go this way. I still didn't answer. Then came the voicemail. His voice was thick with something that was supposed to sound like regret, but just came off as calculated. "Hey, he sighed heavily, like this was so hard for him. "I miss you. I miss us. I know I handled things badly. I just felt like I was losing my wife, and I didn't know how to deal with it. Can we please talk?" I deleted it. A week later, I got a call from his mother. "Sweetheart," she said, her voice all gentle concern. "Alex is miserable without you." I gritted my teeth. "He's a grown man, Diane. He'll live." She hesitated, then went in for the kill. "He's saying you never really gave him a choice," she said, voice soft, like she was giving me something to think about. "That you pushed him away." I nearly laughed. Instead, I asked, "Did he tell you the part where he told me my mother wasn't my responsibility?" Silence. Or how he tried to guilt me into abandoning her. More silence. "I see." She sighed. "I just think marriage is about compromise." "Funny," I said. I don't remember him compromising anything. I hung up before she could say anything else. But I should have known Alex wouldn't let it go. 2 days later, I came home from running errands to find him standing on my porch. He had that look on his face, the one he always wore when he thought he was about to win an argument. The one that said, "I know how to play you." I didn't even bother greeting him. Just walked right past him to unlock the door. "Can we just talk?" he asked. I turned to face him. "Talk about what?" "I miss you." His voice was soft, like he was trying to make me believe it. "I miss us." I crossed my arms. And he blinked. "What do you mean?" And I tilted my head. "And what do you plan to do about it?" He looked thrown off. Like he expected me to melt the second he said he missed me. I don't know," he admitted. "I thought maybe we could start over. Try again." "You mean, you thought I'd be so lonely that I'd take you back?" He opened his mouth, then closed it. I let out a humorless laugh. "Wow, you really thought I'd be falling apart without you, didn't you?" "I thought," he said carefully, "that you'd miss your husband." "You thought wrong." I turned to go inside, but his voice stopped me. "I made a mistake, okay?" I faced him again, arms still crossed. He took a deep breath. I got scared. I panicked. "I should have been there for you, but I didn't know how. And he sighed, running a hand through his hair. "I just want my wife back." I stared at him, really looked at him. He was wearing his best, vulnerable face, the one he used when he wanted forgiveness without actually earning it. The one he used when he wanted me to do the emotional labor of making him feel better. But I wasn't the same person I had been before. "You don't get to just show up and expect me to forget everything," I said. "I know," he said quickly. I shook my head. "No, Alex. You don't get to walk away when things get hard and then come back when you feel like it. That's not how marriage works." His face twisted. "So that's it? You're just throwing away everything we built?" I clenched my jaw. "You threw it away the second you told me my mother wasn't my responsibility." Something in his expression cracked, but I didn't care. I turned, walked inside, and shut the door in his face. But I knew this wasn't over. And I was right. Because 2 days later, I got a letter. From a lawyer. Alex was suing me for half of everything. I stared at the letter in my hands, reading the words over and over like they would change if I just focused hard enough. Alex was suing me for half of everything. Everything. The house. The savings. The small emergency fund I had set aside. Everything. At first, I laughed. A bitter, humorless laugh that bubbled out of my chest before I could stop it. Of course, this was his next move. Of course, he was trying to squeeze money out of me now that I wasn't useful to him anymore. But as the shock wore off, the anger set in. I called the lawyer listed at the bottom of the letter, half expecting it to be a joke. Maybe a misunderstanding. Maybe some desperate attempt at getting my attention. No, it was real. Alex was claiming that since I left my job during our marriage, the finances we had built together were still his to claim. That I had relied on him while I took care of my mother, and now that we were separating, he was entitled to compensation. Compensation. Like he had been paying me some kind of salary to take care of my dying mother. I hung up before I could say something that would get me arrested. I needed a lawyer. I was still trying to process everything when the next hit came. A letter from the bank. My joint account with Alex, an account I had barely touched because I was living off my savings, was empty. I checked the statement online. Every penny. Gone. He had drained it. I sat in stunned silence, my brain struggling to keep up. He had done it on purpose. He must have known he wouldn't win in court, so he took what he could before I had a chance to fight back. I didn't even hesitate. I grabbed my phone, dialed his number, and for the first time since he left, I actually picked up when he answered. Hey, you stole from me. Silence. Then a sigh. Don't be dramatic. I almost threw my phone. Dramatic? You emptied our account. Our account, he repeated, voice calm. Too calm. You weren't even using it. I didn't think you'd mind. I gripped the phone tighter. You didn't think I'd mind? You're the one who left me. My blood ran hot. You left. You gave me no choice. I laughed, short and sharp. Right? Because I wouldn't abandon my mother for you. See, this is what I mean, he said, voice suddenly cold. You never listened to me, never cared about what I needed. And now you're acting like the victim. I was so angry I could barely see straight. You are going to give me my money back? I said, forcing my voice to stay level. He actually had the audacity to scoff. Good luck with that. And then he hung up. I stared at my phone, heart hammering in my chest. I wasn't just angry anymore. I was furious. I wanted to ruin him. I wanted to make him feel small the way he had tried to make me feel small. So I did what I should have done the second he walked out that door. I fought back. I hired the best lawyer I could afford. I went through every bank statement, every receipt, every single document that had both of our names on it. And I found something. Something big. Alex had debts. A lot of debts. He had been racking up credit card bills behind my back, making minimum payments just to keep them from getting shut down. He had borrowed money from his parents, from friends, from my family. And now, he was trying to bleed me dry because he was drowning. I had the proof in my hands. So I made my move. I filed for a forensic accounting review of all our shared finances. If he wanted to take me to court, fine. I would bury him in legal fees before I let him take a single cent. And then, I made the phone calls. To his parents, his friends, the people he owed money to. Because if Alex wanted to play dirty, I could play dirtier. And I was just getting started. Alex had no idea what was coming. By the time I was done, he would regret ever thinking he could walk all over me. I gathered every financial document I could find. Bank statements, loan agreements, credit card bills, anything that had his name on it. Every reckless decision he had made, every lie, every dime he had wasted while I was busy taking care of my dying mother. And then, I hit him where it hurt. I called his parents first. Diane answered, her voice all sugary concern like she hadn't just tried to manipulate me into submission weeks ago. Sweetheart, is everything okay? Did you know Alex has over 30 grand in debt? I asked, skipping the fake pleasantries. Silence. Excuse me, she finally said, her voice suddenly a lot less warm. Yeah, I said, gripping the papers in my hand. Loans, credit cards, even money he borrowed from you. And he was trying to drain my accounts to fix it. A sharp inhale. Then, a slow, careful exhale. I need to call you back. I smiled. I bet she did. Next, I went to the people Alex had borrowed money from. Friends, old co-workers, even a distant cousin who had lent him $5,000 2 years ago that he never paid back. One by one, they all heard the same thing. Alex is drowning in debt. And instead of dealing with it, he tried to take my money. I made sure everyone knew exactly who he was. And then, I waited. It didn't take long. 3 days later, Alex showed up at my door, red-faced and seething. You humiliated me. His voice was low, shaking with barely contained rage. I leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed. Good. His nostrils flared. You had no right to know, right? I cut him off, stepping closer. You stole from me, you tried to take my house, and you thought you'd get away with it. But now everyone knows the truth, and suddenly I'm the bad guy. He exhaled sharply through his nose. You're ruining my life. I let out a bitter laugh. Your life? My life was ruined the second you decided that my mother wasn't my responsibility. His jaw clenched. For the first time, I saw something in his eyes. Not just anger. Fear. I smiled. That forensic accountant I hired? He found something interesting. His face paled. What? I pulled a folded paper from my pocket and held it up. You used our joint credit card to take another woman out to dinner. Repeatedly. I tilted my head. So tell me, Alex, was that before or after you decided I was neglecting our marriage? His mouth opened, then closed. He had nothing to say. I nodded slowly. That's what I thought. I turned and walked back inside, letting the door slam in his face. I stood there for a long time, listening to my own heartbeat, waiting for the rage in my chest to settle. He didn't knock again. And just like that, it was over. A week later, the legal battle was settled. Alex got nothing. Not a penny. Not a piece of the house. Nothing. His own debts swallowed him whole. Diane, of course, tried to call me. Left long voicemails about how she was so disappointed in me for ruining her son's life. I never responded. I had nothing left to say. In the end, I lost two people, my mother and my husband. But only one of them ever truly loved me. Alex thought he could break me. Thought I would fall apart without him. But instead, I finally felt free.